Hi, and welcome to another session, Florida's Great Northwest. I'm your host, Larry Sassano, and I am so proud today to have with us the Honorable Senator Don Gaetz. Senator, welcome again to our show, and thank you for taking your busy schedule to be with us today.
Oh, great to be with you, Larry. Thank you very much.
Today we're going to talk to the Senator about the important economic development activities that are taking place in our region. And I want to focus on the Oil Spill Economic Recovery Act, which, Senator, you are the sponsor for this particular bill. And particularly we're going to talk about the Triumph Fund, which I think is probably a lot of people have heard about the Triumph Fund, but probably don't understand the fund and how it works and how it's put together. So we'd like for you to share with our audience something about the Triumph Fund and what it's all about, sir.
Well, Larry, after the oil spill occurred, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, the Florida legislature, we had tremendous cooperation from Democrats, Republicans, senators, representatives, passed my bill, the Oil Spill Recovery Act, which said that if there were economic damages that were claimed and suffered and paid to the state of Florida, that 75% of that money would go to benefit the 8 disproportionately affected coastal counties of Northwest Florida. And then Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, made a claim against BP for $2 billion that accounted for the state's economic damages. Now, Larry, that's not individuals or businesses or local governments. That's not environmental damages. Those are all through the Clean Water Act, through the Restore Act, and individual claims that businesses and people have made. On top of that, the state itself suffered $2 billion worth of economic damages. Attorney General Bondi successfully made that claim, convinced BP of the accuracy of that claim, got it in front of a federal judge, got the judge to agree, and now 75% of that money, or $1.5 billion, will, because of the Oil Spill Recovery Act, come to coastal Northwest Florida and benefit our economic diversification and development here. And Triumph Gulf Coast is simply the mechanism that was set up in law that creates a 5-member board of business people, not politicians, who will be in charge of this endowment, this $1.5 billion endowment that will be used to diversify and develop our economy, not for you and me, but for our children, our grandchildren, so that generations from now, we'll be able to look and see that those who come after us can compete for real jobs in a real economy that's not just dependent upon the military or just dependent upon tourism, but also would be a diversified economy, manufacturing, aviation, aerospace, many of the industries that Florida's Great Northwest is helping to attract and develop here now. Now, Northwest Florida will be able to be a major player in attracting large employers and small employers, innovative employers, to come here and create new and better paying jobs.
We applaud your vision on this, Senator. We really do. And I don't think there's any individual in the state of Florida that has done more for economic development in Northwest Florida than you. And the first Triumph Gulf Coast meeting took place August 18th. And you were at that meeting. You made a presentation to the audience there. Can you tell us a little bit about the 5-person task force that have been selected to represent these dollars for us?
There are 5 individuals, one chosen by the governor, one by the Attorney General, one by the Chief Financial Officer, one by me, and one by the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And they have the ability, tremendous flexibility, to first manage this large endowment. The first tranche, the first payment from BP will be $300 million, and that will be in January. That runs through the state's treasury to Triumph Gulf Coast. And then over the course of the next 15 years, the rest of the $1.5 billion in economic damages is paid over to the state of Florida and to Triumph Gulf Coast. And these 5 individuals are business leaders in Northwest Florida, and they're people who serve without pay, and they have to abide by the Sunshine Law. So all the business of Triumph Gulf Coast will be in front of the public, will be available for public scrutiny. But these aren't politicians. These are business people who will make business judgments, not to benefit government, but rather to really diversify and develop our economy so that we can have the kind of economic activity that will really give Northwest Florida some independence, so that we become more masters of our fate economically, can compete with Alabama, can compete with Georgia, and can really put a third leg, as well as the military and tourism, under our economy. So these individuals have extended terms. 2 of them have 5-year terms. 2 of them have 4-year, or the other 3 have 4-year terms. They can't be reappointed, and they're not responsible to politicians. Instead, they're responsible to the public.
The 5 individuals that are on this task force, Senator, are all very successful business leaders, as you pointed out. They have an awesome task ahead of them. And I know that they were chosen with very careful discipline because of their backgrounds. Do you anticipate that in the next several months that they will come up with a plan that will guide them to how they're going to allocate these first set of dollars? And when will those first set of dollars be available?
Well, as I indicated, the first tranche of $300 million will come to the state of Florida in January. Then the money passes through the books of the state of Florida to Triumph Gulf Coast. As a practical matter, that could be immediately in January, or it could take as long as July going through the appropriations process. That's up to the leaders of the legislature and the governor. But yes, I would expect that the Triumph Gulf Coast trustees will begin soon developing all of the procedures they'll use. They're required to have financial advisors, economic advisor, legal advisors, so that the use of these funds over the course of 30 years is done very, very carefully. Projects are vetted. Triumph Gulf Coast money can't be the only money into an economic development project, and it can't be the first money in. And that requires, therefore, partnerships with local governments, local economic development organizations, with businesses. There has to be private money involved in any transaction or any deal, as well as Triumph Gulf Coast money. And I would expect that they would take their time and over the course of the next several months determine how they're going to invest this first money that comes in the door, and then how they're going to look at potential incentives or transactions over the next few months and years.
Oftentimes, Senator, when economic developers are working projects, they're all competitive. You know, we're usually competing against several of our southeastern states. Texas, of course, is a big player and competitor to us. Alabama and Georgia, as you pointed out, South Carolina. We get to a point with the project where we use the state incentives, and then we look at the local incentives, and then we present that to the client and hope that it's a good enough deal for them to say, yes, I want to come to Florida, I want to come to Northwest Florida. With these additional dollars, as you pointed out, they are not the first set of dollars that should be looked at, but they should be used as leverage dollars. Is that not correct?
It is, and for the first time, Northwest Florida is going to be able to look at big employers, the right kind of employers that we really want, and be a big, big player. When you've got this kind of money, you can step in and make deals. But you can't buy business and hope to keep it, because somebody else will come along and offer 5 cents more. So we also have to stress the other advantages that we have, other than now the ability to be a big player in economic incentives. We also have to make sure that we've got a qualified workforce. And that's why the Triumph Gulf Coast legislation, which we passed, provides that we can use some of this money to make sure that we're training a workforce to be competitive. Florida has lost deals, Northwest Florida has lost deals that could have brought real jobs to our area, jobs that pay more than the average wage now, and we've lost some of those deals because we didn't have the ability to put a trained, qualified workforce in place when it was needed by people who wanted to come in and bring those jobs to Florida. It doesn't help to create jobs if you don't have qualified, competitive Floridians ready to take those jobs and make economic activity happen. So some money may be used to make sure that we're competitive in being able to to bring jobs here through a qualified workforce and to put that workforce in place quickly.
Yeah, you're so right, Senator. Many of the projects that I've worked over a period of years, training, capabilities, availability of the skilled workforce is number one. Location used to be the key factor in a decision for a company. Location, location, location. It's still important, obviously, but having that trained workforce is really the top factor today that these site selectors and these company decision makers look at. So by allowing that to be a part of the usage of these dollars is critical for us if we're going to win these projects from these other states.
You're right, Larry, and you know, I'm not a senator by profession. I just play one on TV. But my background is in healthcare, and along with a couple of partners, we started a small company, grew it into a national company, 19 states, 5,000 employees, and a fairly large company. And I can tell you that the decisions we made about where to go were, of course, based on all of the usual economic indicators. But the regulatory environment and the availability of qualified workforce was a critical component in any expansion or site selection decision that we made. And Florida already has the lowest per capita tax burden of any state in America. We've got an extraordinary climate. We have a regulatory environment that's good and getting even better. It's highly competitive. We need to make sure that we can go toe-to-toe in economic incentives and in making sure that if somebody needs a rail spur, that we can put it there. If they need to have a road to get to a location, that road is available. We need to make sure that we have the infrastructure. But now, because of Triumph Gulf Coast and this $1.5 billion in economic damages paid by BP, we're going to be able to develop workforce and have economic incentives that ought to put us in a position to compete for the kind of jobs that will really benefit Northwest Floridians.
I noticed that in the legislation, Senator, there's really not specific language directing what types of industry sectors that these dollars can be used for. I assume that was done purposely.
It was. As we wrote the legislation, we were trying to not micromanage. Who knows what the emerging industries that can bring better jobs and higher pay to Northwest Florida will be in 5 or 10 or 15 years? Who could have predicted, for example, that unmanned aerial vehicles would be a multi-billion-dollar business emerging in this country right now? So we want to give maximum flexibility to the 5 trustees who are strong business leaders who know how to make business decisions. The idea here is not to have politicians say you ought to pick winners and losers, this company over that company, this industry over that industry, but instead to say whatever the emerging opportunity is to really have sustained economic development and diversification, to bring real jobs to Northwest Florida, whatever that is, we want Triumph Gulf Coast to be in a position now with a substantial amount of investment cash and with significant flexibility to seize those opportunities to make sure that we can bring the best transactions to Northwest Florida.
You know, I have to guess at this, Senator, and you're going to clarify for me, but that when you were drafting that legislation, you must have thought, wow, this is a lot of money. What political ramifications do you think could happen, in reality, with these dollars over a period of time?
Well, at the time that we were developing the Oil Spill Recovery Act, that was 2011. The oil spill, as you know, was the previous year. And then when Attorney General Bondi was able to make a case for economic damages for the state of $2 billion, it could have been a lot less, but the evidence showed that the state itself sustained $2 billion in economic damages in these 8 coastal counties. That's when we really were looking then at the need to go back and fine-tune the law, which we did thanks to Speaker Will Weatherford and his cooperation. That's at the point at which we knew we were talking about substantial, huge amounts of money, the largest economic development fund in Florida's history, now benefiting Northwest Florida. And that's when we decided to be very specific about the need to vet projects, to have people in charge who were not involved in politics, but our business people, and to make sure that all of this was done in the sunshine. But when we started, Larry, we didn't know if the economic damages would be 50 million or 500 million, but it was thanks to Pam Bondi that we were able to make the case for $2 billion that BP is now paying over 15 years, $1.5 billion of that coming directly to Northwest Florida.
Senator, how were the 8 counties, the coastal counties, determined to get that percentage of those dollars? Who made that type of decision?
Well, the evidence made the decision, Larry. When Attorney General Bondi and her team of economic researchers and attorneys were putting together the case for Florida's economic damages, they looked at where those economic damages were. And unsurprisingly, they were in the coastal areas of Northwest Florida, because that's where, number one, we sustained the damage, but more importantly, that's where the perception caused economic difficulties of a substantial nature. And of course, when a company goes out of business, they're not paying taxes anymore. That's an economic damage to the state. When a person loses his job because the company's gone out of business, or if they have their hours cut, then that person is not paying taxes to support our schools or our roads or the other important parts of our infrastructure that are supported by taxes. And so the evidence indicated where the harm was, and the evidence accumulated by the Attorney General also indicated the extent of the harm. Now, across the whole Gulf Coast area, it was north of $6 billion. But in Florida, the economic damages, again, sustained by the state, that's over and above individuals and businesses and environmental damages, but economic damages sustained by the state, $2 billion. And the evidence drove the determination of where those damages were. Now, the other thing is that this $1.5 billion in economic diversification funds isn't intended to be spread somehow over 8 coastal counties. It's intended to be used to benefit the economy of Northwest Florida because of the economic damages sustained in those counties. Individuals who made claims, businesses who made claims, have for the most part had their claims processed, although some probably will go on for many, many years. This is economic damages sustained by the state, and the money can be used to create industrial development of the kind that we want, commercial development of the kind that we need, that will benefit not only those who can smell salt water, but benefit our whole region.
Can I take you with me in my next show when I'm out in Chicago or New York and I'm telling companies, we've got some great incentives available to you, and here's our senator to tell us about it.
I'll carry your bags, Larry. You're the great economic development salesman for Northwest Florida. I'll come along and hold your coat and carry your bags.
I want to ask you another question about the 8 counties, Senator, so that the audience understands that these dollars don't necessarily say that 10% of those dollars are going to go to Escambia County or Wakulla County or Okaloosa County. It's a matter of what?
Where the deals are. If folks in Santa Rosa County can, and I hope they will, find an opportunity to attract a business that would bring a lot of jobs to Santa Rosa County, or an entity that's there now that could expand and bring a lot of additional jobs that would be high-paying jobs to Santa Rosa County, then that deal will be considered on its own merits, not because it's in Santa Rosa, but because it's a good deal. And the 5 trustees, again, getting good economic advice, good legal advice, getting a lot of help in finding and prospecting for those deals from organizations like Florida's Great Northwest, can make a reasoned decision about where the best opportunity is to prime the pump of the economy. So it's not spreading the money out in some kind of formula fashion. Instead, it's going where the opportunities are to create jobs. If we create jobs, believe me, if we have a trained workforce, the jobs in the workforce will come together, whether it's in Santa Rosa County or Wakulla County or Okaloosa County or any of the other counties in our area.
We have to be vigilant with how these dollars are appropriated when we go after them in terms of projects that we have. There's another reason for us to be vigilant because these are a lot of dollars, and if we aren't successful in the intent of the usage of those dollars, what will happen, Senator?
Well, this is $1.5 billion. It's not taxpayer dollars, but it's economic damages that our Attorney General went after and collected on behalf of the state of Florida. And when they run through the books of the state of Florida, there becomes a public stewardship obligation. And so that's why Triumph Gulf Coast and its trustees have to use extraordinary stewardship in the management of these dollars and in the investment of these dollars in individual projects. If we don't have strong provisions to claw back money when deals don't materialize and jobs don't happen, then we're going to have egg on our face in front of the whole state. And politicians elsewhere in the state are going to say, well, maybe we can do a better job with that money. Give that money to us. That's why we put in the legislation requirements for return on investment calculations and clawbacks. So this isn't faith-based economic development. This is economic development based on a real business plan. And if the jobs don't materialize, we want our money back, and we'll get our money back and then redeploy it in some other project or investment that will really work for people who want better jobs.
Senator, we don't want to disappoint the intent that you had and Pam Bondi had for these dollars, or their legislature for that matter. The economic development community, led by Florida's Great Northwest, promises you that we will do everything we can to work together as a team. That's what we've been doing successfully amongst ourselves as local economic developers and regional economic developers. And we've got a good reputation around the country for doing that. But this is something different. What do we need to do to work to help the communities, particularly these 8 coastal counties, to understand that they have to work together to be successful with the use of these dollars in growing economic vitality for their area?
Well, Ben Franklin said, if we don't hang together, we'll hang separately. And I think that's the case with respect to this economic diversification and development opportunity. We really operate as a region, or should operate as a region. If you put a company that creates 600 jobs down in the middle of Walton County somewhere, the economic benefits spread out to the neighboring counties and the neighboring communities. So everybody's a winner or everybody's not a winner. And there are only 2 senators out of 40 in Florida who sleep in the Central Time Zone. And so we can't keep this money, and we can't deserve this money based on some kind of political power. We have to do it based on effective results. So the best thing that Florida's Great Northwest can do, and I know will do it under your leadership, is to make sure that good opportunities are brought forward, that they're properly vetted, that there's cooperation from local government and from our local economic development organizations, that we take advantage of all of the brain power, as many heads in the huddle as we can get, to identify good prospects and then bring them into our area. Nobody's going to come here just because we wave money at them. They're going to come here because the community wants them, because the school system is good, because the tax environment locally as well as statewide is conducive to economic growth and development, and because there's a trained workforce ready to help. So all of those pieces have to come together. That means everybody. Our colleges and universities, our school systems, our local governments, our EDOs, our private business leaders all have to work together to make this $1.5 billion really add value to Northwest Florida. If we fraction it out, if we divide it out, if we compete against each other, then we'll not only lose the effectiveness of the dollars we do get, we could lose the money.
Senator, we have time just for one more question and answer, and that would be, we've got 8 coastal counties. In Florida's Great Northwest, we have 16 counties. If we are successful in the use of these dollars in creating jobs and capital investment for these 8 counties, how will the other 8 counties benefit from that?
Well, the only people who pay attention to county lines are politicians who draw them. Our culture, our economy, our educational system, even where we go to church and synagogue, is no respecter of county lines. And so consequently, if we can create opportunities for new businesses or expanding businesses in any part of coastal Northwest Florida, the supply chain for those businesses will extend not only in the counties that smell saltwater, but will extend all the way to the Alabama border and candidly beyond, even into Alabama. Northwest Florida must operate and think and challenge itself as a region, because we do win together or we do lose together. So I represent Holmes County and Washington County and Jackson County, as well as representing Okaloosa County and Bay County and Walton County. And I know very well that if we can do good things in northern Bay County, it's going to benefit the Ridge, which is up near the Alabama border. If we can do good things in northern Santa Rosa County, honestly, it's going to benefit our friends in Alabama. We operate as a region. We need to think as a region. And if we do, we will have the greatest economic development opportunity in Florida's history, thanks to Triumph Gulf Coast and the great support of Florida's Great Northwest and our friends around the state who want Northwest Florida to succeed. Here is our opportunity of a lifetime.
And that's the message, folks. Thank you, Senator Gaetz, for Triumph Gulf Coast. We appreciate you. And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed listening to the Senator and talk about this great program ahead of us. Thank you for joining us today. I'm your host, Larry Sassano, Florida's Great Northwest.